Okay, greetings. This is a video overview of chapter 1 in the Introduction to Nutrition class, and I am going to go through these slides, which are available to you a little bit quickly and connect them to the Exam 1 study guide. You are welcome to pause this video at any time and explore the slides further, compare to the textbook, compare to other readings, and take your time learning in a manner that's best for you. I wanted to start off just acknowledging that we have for centuries known that there's a connection between nutrition and health and wellness. And so this comes from many different places in the world, and I've just shared a couple, and we continue to have that belief up into this current century, with, I think, most notably Michael Pollan's description of eat food, not too much, mostly plants, and I always like to add, and move your body. We start off with a definition. What is nutrition? And I've given you several definitions here that you can take time to look at. This kind of study of the science of food and the nutrients therein, and how we process these nutrients, their interaction in relation to our health and wellness, and that a nutrient specifically, when we look at those, is a substance that plants, animals, and people need to live and grow. We use them for growth, repair, and maintenance. We classify nutrients as either essential or non-essential, and essential just means that we can't obtain, we don't synthesize them either at all or in a quantity that's sufficient. I think vitamin D is the most notable for people that we know if we go out in the sun, we'll synthesize some vitamin D, but that's not an adequate amount. So nutrients that we must get from our diet to prevent deficiency are considered essential nutrients. There are 6 classes of nutrients. The macronutrients include carb, protein, and fat. I'll give you other ways to classify those. Those are the macros along with water, and then the micro, the small nutrients, are vitamins and minerals. And that is actually related to kind of the composition in our bodies. If we look at how much of each of the different nutrients comprise our different bodies, we see that water is the greatest amount, and then there's some differentiation depending on your body. I think we've talked about that already. So then there are also other compounds other than these nutrients that we consume. There are compounds in foods such as plant-based foods, phytochemicals that are biologically active and promote all kinds of different beneficial health things. So lycopene and anthocyanin and lycopene. Did I say that already? I might have. And phenol, anything that's phenols in category. So those are just some of the ones that people are familiar with, and they might help lower blood pressure, they might help fight cancer or carcinogens. They have different impacts on our body, but they help with health and wellness. And then there are also some of these in animal-based foods as well. And I have defined for you on your slides that a functional food is a food that just provides a health benefit beyond its not nutrient composition. That's many foods in their whole form, particularly if they're plant-based. And the nutraceutical is more of like your some of the types of supplements that you might take, where they kind of take a nutrient and then we give you a higher dose of it and make it almost a pharmaceutical. And I've given you some different examples of what these would be, and you are welcome to look at those at your leisure. We classify nutrients as being either organic and inorganic, and that doesn't have to do with the processing, but rather with the whether they have carbon or not. And we will discuss this more in the course, this kind of chemistry of nutrition. And we classify foods as either inorganic, or organic, and I've given you the foods that are organic, that are carbon containing. And then we talk about whether foods are calorie containing and we obtain energy from them. Not that they help us get the energy, which is what you find vitamins and minerals do, and water, but do we actually get energy from food? Calories just a measure of energy in foods, and each of the different nutrients plus alcohol, which is not a nutrient, that provides us with calories, provides us with a certain amount per gram. These are averages, but gives you a general idea. And I do ask you to be able to calculate out, if you were given a certain number of grams, that you would know how many calories are in a food based on that. And I just give you some references of what that looks like, how we use these different energy in the world and in your movement, and how some people might use more or less. Some would say here that the horse is using most of the energy, and then some would say a much lower amount here. And then just more slides on that. And then your non-energy nutrients are the remaining three: water, vitamins, and minerals. And again, we will study these a little bit more through the course, but just to give you some basic ideas about these particular nutrients, and that there's differences based on solubility or based on the quantity. What you eat is affected by many different things, and you could probably add beyond this, but just being aware that we don't make decisions about food for just one reason, usually, not just because of nutrition, for example. It might be because it's in our house. We can afford it. We can access it quickly. There are many different reasons. Maybe you'll take a few minutes to ponder on why you chose to eat the last meal that you actually ate. And then there are also physiological factors, right? Biology, that you have hunger. There are compounds that say to eat or stop eating. And so all our reasons for picking certain foods aren't only driven by these external factors, but also by internal factors. Nutrition assessment is something that would be done by a qualified professional, but parts of it come from different healthcare providers. So we look at measurements of the body as anthropometrics, and biochemicals labs. And then some of these are a little bit easier to understand. But we want to look at all these different things. What's your genetics? What's your access to food like? What's your own personal history if you have something that affects your food intake? All of that needs to be considered in a nutrition assessment. And you will look at something called the nutrition care process, and you should be familiar with the steps in the nutrition care process. Let's see. Yeah, this is just some ideas of how you might do your dietary assessment. And then something you might want to do is think through this nutrition care process, this planning process of how you assess. You would actually look at all of this information to make your assessment. And then from that, a diagnosis would be made. RDs don't make diagnoses, but we'd identify a problem. And then you would decide on the intervention and you evaluate. You'll have opportunities to do this in this course, actually. So be familiar with this. There will be case studies that include this, and there will be information about those case studies on different quizzes and exams. Then we assess. What do we think about the nutrition status of the person? And I'm going to give you some information on malnutrition in the USA because, and also note that some of these nutrients are problematic worldwide, actually. But that actually in the USA, we see malnutrition more than people might think. And that's going to, if access to food becomes an issue for a person, that's going to become even more extreme. And there are many things that can affect food access. We'll talk more about them in chapter 3. And then just some, why do we want to prevent malnutrition anyway? Some basic information that you'll read about again in another chapter about the different types of malnutrition. We do see different types of malnutrition depending on the cause of the malnutrition. Okay, again, more of this information in a future chapter, but I just like to mention it here because I think food insecurity is a real concern. I should change that slide. I will, to say food insecurity, but it is a real concern that we see throughout our own country. Okay. I wanted to get to, and again, you can look at those. Some of that content that you see is also in chapter 3, but I just want to make sure that we mention it now because it might come up in a case study when you're thinking about what you want to do. And then we want to look at specifically the, I skipped, I do need to make some updates to my slides, but let me fix this one right now. 2020, thank you, the typo. We have Healthy People 2020 available to us, and so these kind of drive some of the policy, we hope. We hope this drives some of the policy, that public health policy in regard to what we recommend to people, and it'd be great if we did that, use that to support the food supply. I don't know that we really do that, but one can wish. And then coming back to this idea that nutrition is a science. So we're going to do science in this course, and it's very important that we recognize what is science and what is not science, and that we understand that there's a whole process for conducting research. And because it is so detailed and specific and requires getting all the data. It takes a long time to come up with conclusions. And so that we will see frustration with that. But if we want to know, if we want to determine what we believe to be the most factual, we want to go through the scientific method and the scientific process to come up with that. I'm going to let you do this on your own. This is kind of a silly little thing that I have for you where you get to kind of apply the scientific method. And then at the end, if you were in an in-person class, you might be asked, what do we think? Did we prove our hypothesis or not? And then we remember that we always need to look at limitations when we're looking at a study, because there are always limitations. And so that's what we're trying to test for and control for as we do further studies. We don't want to just do one study on something. We want to do many studies if we're trying to find something. You're going to be looking at research articles in here in this course. And so it's important that you understand the kind of pyramids of evidence, or the hierarchy of what we consider the best. So if we're taking informations from editorials or case reports, that's not going to be near as strong as a cohort study or a double-blind study, or really a review is kind of the gold standard, versus things that aren't, we consider pseudoscience, isn't really based in science, or it doesn't give us the representation of the most current that we know in this particular period of time. And then lastly, you don't have to do that. That would be if you want. You could do that for fun on your own. I give you some information on study designs. You will be asked to know study designs in this course. You will be asked to read studies and identify the study design and plan a sample study based on the study design. So please take some time to learn about this. And in the semester, we have an SI leader. They're really good at going over this information with you as well. And then, yeah, differences between causation and correlation. You can make all kinds of crazy correlations. I see it all the time in the news and what people call public health, and on social media. But we want to actually know that something caused something. Because things are correlated, that does not mean that they actually are causative. And then finally, just being able to evaluate nutrition advice, looking at the 10 red flags is one way to go about doing that. Looking for real science. This is an old video. I'll probably actually delete it because it is so old, but it really is, if you ever look it up, it is actually rather interesting to see what people will say on a TV show compared to what they know to actually be true. So I have just some different things for you to consider here, some more questions you might want to ask. I give you some information now about the fact that supplements are regulated differently than food. And so the level of evidence for the claims on a supplement aren't as great as they will be on some of the food label claims that we'll see in the next chapter. And finally, that the dietitian is considered the nutrition expert. And this is really the registered dietitian, the RD or the RDN, because they are the person who has specifically studied not only nutrition, like someone with a PhD might have done, but they've also studied the clinical practice. Like, how do I just not take this knowledge, but do I put it into clinical practice to help people? I'm not saying someone with a PhD is not educated in nutrition, but they might not be as familiar as using it, doing clinical practice, and they would tell you that. So I hope that helps you get through if you're a person who likes lecture slides. And I will make these slides. These slides are available for you in our course. And of course, you want to make sure you read the book, because this information is in the book and expanded on in such a way that you might see on a quiz or a check and an exam, and also used in discussion activities. So that's it for me. Eat well, play fit.